Howdy, folks. Woody Wallace from NeedCoffee.com here. Back again for another Wayhomer review, but let me explain. Normally, yes, I leave the cinema, I come directly out to the car, and I get in and I drive away, and I tell you my review. This time that happened, but I realized as I was driving away that my iPhone, which is what's recording me now, was set up in such a way that the sunlight was going to bake it. So I had to pull off, re-swizzle everything, and basically start over. But I didn't get that far before I'd realized that I needed to start over, so I hate doing second takes, but really there was no way of salvaging what was going on, and I didn't want to have to, pick up my iPhone with a syringe. So anyway, here's how the Wayhomer works, is that once I'm in my car, I tell you about the film on my way home. So at least that portion of it, we're going to be able to get done. And today we're here to talk about Man of Steel in IMAX with a bit of this. Okay, so, Man of Steel. Synopsis first. Synopsis is a reasonably well-known tale of a planet called Krypton, which is on its last legs, so to speak, and Jor-El, who's the guy who's been saying that it's going to be on its last legs if they don't do something, and of course they haven't done something, and so everybody's screwed. But not everybody, because Jor-El and his wife basically take their infant son, Kal-El, and stick him in a rocket and send him to Earth, where on Earth, because of our different sun and whatnot, he will gain superpowers and be able to wear a cape. But of course, it's never that easy, and hijinks thus ensue, because with the death of one planet, could the life of another be held in the balance? There's your synopsis. Okay, before we get started, let's just take a moment to say thank you to the people who did the marketing behind Man of Steel, because you managed to make me excited about seeing a Superman film for the first time in 30 years. And I must say, the fact that I can actually say that there's some sort of pop culture thing that for me spans 3 decades is very sobering and makes me just want to drive off a bridge. But that being said, well done with all of that. And the reason why I finally came on board was it's Cavill. Is it Cavill? The guy who's playing, I can't pronounce anything. I'm I'm able to pronounce Clark Kent. Clarka something. I screw it up somehow. Anyway, he managed to make me think that there was somebody who could play Superman who wasn't Christopher Reeve. Because let's face it, Christopher Reeve was so good at making you believe he was Superman, he wore that outfit in a live-action film, and it worked, which is saying something. But the thing that did it for me was the idea that before flying off to do battle with bad guys, Superman, to me, is the guy who says, excuse me. He's the guy who, despite the fact he has the powers of a god, still feels that he needs to be, well-mannered. That, to me, is Superman. So that kind of got me on board. And really, that's the thing this film does best, is its casting. Because not only do you have Cavill as Superman and Clark Kent, who I think really sells that sort of thing, that ultimate debate of nature versus nurture, by nature Kryptonian, by nurture Kansasian. I mean, so he works that. Also of note, I really do like the Kents, right? I mean, Kevin Costner, an inspired choice, who actually manages to be in one of the film's few emotional sequences that manages to stick its head through all of the Explodo sequences. And that works. So he's really good. And Diane Lane's really good. And, Amy Adams is fairly good at Lois Lane, right? So you got this nice cast. However, the thing that really sells it for me is Michael Shannon as General Zod. Now, this isn't some sort of spoiler thing where it's like, well, is he Khan or is he not Khan? No, he's Zod. And here's the amazing thing about how good an actor Michael Shannon actually is that without the context of the film, in the trailer where he's screaming, you might think that he was playing one of those screamy, shouty villains, right? You know what I'm talking about. That just seems so over the top that they don't work. Like, Jeremy Irons, your blood will rain from the sky. I mean, from Dungeons and Dragons, right? Where you just go, wow, you are so in this for the paycheck. But no, Michael Shannon managed to craft a Zod that makes sense. It makes sense for him to yell when he yells and scream when he screams and be so Zod, So that is fascinating to watch. He is just absolutely fascinating to watch. And Russell Crowe is good in his sort of Zen, I am the Master Splinter of Kryptonians sort of thing. It's sort of whiskery like Master Splinter, So that works too. So yeah, the cast manages to, when you do have emotional moments, when you do have thoughtful moments in this film, they ride them. They allow them to come through. They work them. And if it wasn't for that spare amount of grounding, which I felt like the film needed more of, then all the Explodo bits would have been even more preposterous than they were. Now, a word about that. Now we get into problem territory, because this film, it's hard for me to put in like a box what's wrong with it. Because there are certain things that, like, it almost feels like they tried to cram too much into two films. Now, I fully admit that might be because I'm looking at this as sort of not a remake, but it sort of takes the same material from both Superman 1 and 2, the Christopher Reeve version, was based on. So maybe that's a bias on my part, and I admit that, okay? But it still felt sort of, I don't know, hopelessly convoluted, and in a way that only a cast this good could save. It almost felt like there was too much going on, that they were trying to cram too much into 2 hours and 23 minutes. And I think part of that has to do with the fact that the whole end game feels really complicated, and not complicated from a standpoint of, okay, here's how it feels complicated. Not in the standpoint of that, the audience is too dim to figure out what's going on. Although, to be fair, the IMAX sound balance was off in the cinema that I saw it, so some lines I missed. So if you hear anything in this review and you go, what the hell is he talking about? That was perfectly clear. It might be because I missed a crucial line in the dialogue. I admit that freely. But the problem with Superman, and they've experienced this in the comics, is that you've got a character who's so powerful. What can you possibly put him up against that will take him long enough to deal with that you could have a 2 hour and 23 minute movie, right? I mean, this, apart from putting him up against, the long shadow of DC Comics' failed franchises. So you sort of have to make things a little bit complicated so that it doesn't take him 3 seconds to sort it all out. I appreciate that. However, it didn't feel organic. It felt like the writers, and I feel for the writers, okay? I feel for David S. Goyer, sitting there going, okay, how do we make this work? Because it's difficult. I admit that. But part of your way of making it work, and I fretted about how to put this across while watching the closing credits and waiting for Nick Fury to show up. I was really concerned about how to say this because it's such a trivial piece of the film, such a trivial thing, but it's so absolutely crucial to suspense sequences in the film, almost hilariously so, that I don't want to spoil it. So I decided to compromise. And the compromise is this. I'm going to say something that's kind of like the thing I'm talking about, but isn't actually the thing I'm talking about. And then you can draw your own conclusions. But I would say this. If you were an alien race, okay, and you had settled the stars, and you've got, warp drive sort of things, and you've got, crazy liquid machine sort of things, and you can, genetically engineer your entire race, and you're basically, I forget, it's like a class 1.5, I have no idea which class of civilization would be, but you're on up there, okay? Would you or would you not have figured out some way of avoiding that thing where you put new batteries into the remote control for the television, and for some reason it's not working, and you make yourself crazy for about 10 minutes, smacking it on the table and checking the TV and wiping it off, whatever, before you realize that you've put the batteries in backwards? Close enough. So when you've got that going on, it stretches credibility to me, especially when it's such a huge suspense thing that everything turns upon. It just seems a bit silly. So you've got things like that in here. You've got things like, okay, if there is an alien, attacking Earth, right? And even if you are punching people across cities and across continents, right? If you're in some sort of metropolitan area, why, when you crash into the area, are people standing around looking calm? Especially once they've realized it's happening everywhere. How is that happening? How are there still people not running and screaming somewhere? Okay? And how is it that there are these people standing around, or, just happening to still be running, or whatever? You have extras in places doing things that they shouldn't technically be doing, except where you have 3 of your minor characters who are in danger, and they appear to be the only people in that zip code. How does that work? And this goes to the point, is that, as I've said before, I can turn my brain off. I will hand it to the coat check person as I walk into the theater. If there isn't a coat check person, I will imagine one and give them my brain. But if my brain wakes up and starts picking the thing apart, it will do so mercilessly. And that's what was happening here. I had enough time to think about the background extras in scenes in which cities are getting their asses handed to them. What is that about? So, and it just seemed so huge. It just seemed so big that it was like, I don't know. It seemed to want to the closing sequence wanted to out Avengers. And I don't know how that's possible to do. Partly because Avengers at least has enough sense to put extras in there that appear to be afraid for their lives. I don't know. But anyway, so you have things in there like that. You have things that don't make any sense. And the whole convoluted nature of the ending, I still don't know. And again, it may have been a line I missed, but I thought I heard bits that made it very nebulous as to the motives behind everything that was happening. Like from the very beginning, motives that were happening. It seemed a little sinister. And I wasn't sure what the shot was. And I went, oh, well, that's an interesting twist. But I don't know if it was twisty or I just couldn't hear it. So there's that as well. But I think my main problem is that you've got this great cast who are just having to make do the best they can with a story that could have been really, really interesting and played around with a lot of different ideas about what it means to be human, what it means to be the other, what it means to be the other and be feared. It touches on those, but never delves. And instead wants to just give you a protracted fight sequence at the end, which, again, could have been awesome. That was one of the few things I took away from, what's its face? Sucker Punch. Sucker Punch was like, oh, well, at least we get to see what some of the effects for Superman are going to be like. Imagine the fights that I've complained about, where you've got all this fight choreography going on, but they've put the camera like right here, and they edit like this, right? So you can't tell who's fighting whom and why. Now take that and blow that up so that you're doing it across entire city blocks, if not continents, and you're doing it at super speed. And then you realize that the only reason it makes sense for Superman to have a cape, even though they made that awful looking costume not the focus and made it actually make some semblance of sense where I was able to forgive it, which is a tall order. The only reason Superman has a cape, it appears, is so that in the blurry fight sequences, when they're fighting at super speed, you can go, I see a red blur, that must be Superman. And that's disappointing. Because the cast deserved better, and I know this thing is going to make a ton of money, and it's going to come back and they're going to do a sequel, and they've already set up a way that they can make Brainiac awesome. But, that all being said, this really could have been better. And I know why, it wasn't. It's a hell of a lot easier to reboot Batman than it is to reboot Superman. It seems to me anyway, from a writing standpoint. Batman, you don't have to try to, you're not trying to impress anybody by leveling cities. But here you are. And that just seems to take up a whole lot of time. When I wish they could have spent some more of that time on, I don't know, character things. Now, that being said, if you enjoy Explodo, you're going to love the hell out of the end of this movie. But that's part of the problem too, is that it seems to where it's, hey, we want to have the thoughtful moments that we had in like Batman and stuff. We want to be thought-provoking and we want to actually have emotional beats. And then it just morphs into something else at the end and never seems to go back anywhere. It tries, but there's so much Explodo that it almost seems like it's trying too hard, if that makes sense. So here's the deal. I would say it's worth seeing. For Michael Shannon alone, it's worth seeing. But I would say skip the IMAX, because the big screen is nice. But the sound, at least for me, was wonky. In the same way that some people I heard complain, not just in the cinema I was in, that Dark Knight Rises was wonky, right? So, if you went to a cinema and you'd have a problem with Dark Knight Rises, maybe you'll be fine. Maybe it's a cinema thing. I don't know. But I would say skip the IMAX. And in fact, I would almost say skip the 3D. Because there was nothing in there like, I don't know, there was no Avatar level wowness with the 3D. I think it would have been fine just in regular 2D on a regular screen. And I would say catch a matinee so you can save a few bucks. But, it's worth seeing for the cast and the promise of maybe them getting it straight and, doing the right thing for the sequel. We can hope. So anyway, there you go. So that's Man of Steel in the can. Thanks so much for watching these things. And as always, please, if you do enjoy these, or even if you don't, share it with someone. Someone who might enjoy them. Or if you don't like these things, then share them with someone who will hate your guts for it. We don't care. We just want the traffic. Thanks. So yes, and until next time, we'll see you on the Wayhomer Reviews. So, bye. Speaking of iPhones, it just occurred to me, Apple, I know you've mentioned, and I know you watch this, so that's why I'm speaking directly to you, Apple. I know it's been mentioned that iOS 7 will have the ability to have like a change in the Siri voice so it could be male, but I would vote for a General Zod, Michael Shannon Siri voice, much like you could do with a GPS. A lot of GPSs will let you plug in, like Brian Blessed or somebody. But I would love to be able to say, Siri, where is the closest coffee shop? And then I want Michael Shannon's voice to go, I will find it! And then find it. And then yell the directions to me. That would make my day. What a genius.